virtual everything.
Trying to figure out how to get a copy of this.
You know what? I don't get a paper.
Thank you. Is it different than the one in the evening? I don't think so. I don't think it's
Easier
different.
to like
Okay.
flip back, go, oh, no, actually, they said,
There's an extra
oh,
one.
there's a sweet little Kendall one you can get the white on.
No, I've got one.
How about that? Stick the paper.
Okay, so what's it? Yeah.
Sounds like it's working.
Someone needs to.
Yeah, he was just testing it. That's. So now you just need to mute your computer, yeah. There
There
you
we
go.
go. I'm gonna leave the meeting. This virtual. Well, looks like that's working. Is OB, I didn't see OB still on, is he?
He's there. Oh, and he heard that.
I'm here and I can hear you guys. Yep.
Good, yay.
Right, well,
Oh, and now I need to mute.
OB, would you like me to chair? Or would you rather chair?
I think he's still muted.
You're on mute, OB.
OB, you just have to unmute yourself.
Uh, you should just go ahead and do it, Jerry, if you're fine with it.
Sounds good. All right, are we ready to start? Yeah. We'll call the meeting to order at 4:38 PM on the 8th of April. And so we'll call the meeting to order. First thing we have on the agenda is citizens to be heard. Do we have any citizens to be heard today?
Doesn't look like it.
Nobody? Okay, next is ex parte communications and disclosures. Any ex parte communications and disclosures? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on to approval of the meeting minutes for March 25th. Any comments on the meeting minutes for March 25th?
I move that we pass those minutes.
I'll second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay,
Oh, yes.
did unanimously pass them? All right, so now we're on to department updates.
So I just wanted to note a couple of things. You probably know that we had to say goodbye to Jenna, our associate planner. She moved on. She took a job at the City of Grand Junction's planning department. And so she started there. Her last day was at the end of March, so she's there already, and we've been working to fill that position. She didn't leave on any bad note. It was all good. She just kind of was curious about that opportunity and went for it and was offered that position. So we were really sad to see her go. I know. So we told her if she doesn't like it, she's welcome to come back.
Nice.
And we really gave her a hard time for leaving, but we did actually get a lot of applications. I posted the job like right as soon as she told me that she was putting in her notice. So we did get a bunch of applications. We had some interviews last week, and we're getting close to hopefully narrowing that down. And so, yeah, trying to get somebody to fill that. And then we had 3 proposals come in for the future land use plan, land use chapter update from the consultants. So out of those 3, there were 2 that were like a tie based on the review committee's scoring. And so we went ahead and did interviews with both of the top 2 consultants firms. That was last week, and it looks like we have a winner. So we're gonna be able to offer that to them. I'm gonna reach out tomorrow, and
Cool.
yeah, so we'll get the contract hopefully I'm actually hoping we can get the contract on the commission's agenda for next week, get that approved, and then we'll be
It's
just,
gonna totally, right?
yeah, it's a pretty much, I mean, it's based a lot, it's gonna be building on all the work we've already been doing though, like all the public workshops we held back last year. And then, we've already started to develop those land use designations, the future land use designations. So it'll be based on all of that stuff, and they'll just take all of that and then continue to build on it.
That's cool.
Yeah, so we're excited. And then I don't think we have any other major updates right now, do we? I don't know. This is kind of far off in the future, but we did get awarded the grant, the UDOT grant for doing the non-motorized trails master plan comprehensive update, which is gonna include creating an entire new portion or a new chapter that's gonna be all active transportation focused. Yeah. And that'll be working with the Bryan County Active Transportation and Trails Division, and probably won't get started till the end of this year or fallish. Yeah.
Is that gonna include the 28?
No, I think that's a separate, UDOT did select that highway for review for planning for supplemental, I don't know, it's what they call it.
Are they going to the BLM for that? Cause I know that the BLM, I was talking to somebody in the BLM the other day and they're talking about their plan to expand the trail on 128.
I think so. I think the BLM is one of the stakeholder people that will be working with the consultants and UDOT. So yeah, they're gearing up to do this whole study for improvements of Highway 128. Yeah, so we'll be following that. Yeah, that's all I have for department updates.
Okay, any questions? All right. On to county commission update.
I have nothing. I went all through all my stuff and I don't have anything since I saw you guys last.
Yeah, I think the next meeting that the Escape Adventures hearing, appeal hearing is
Once
happening?
it is gonna say that's the only thing that we received. I don't even know what you call that, an appeal
An
to the
appeal.
appeal?
An appeal to the administrative
Right,
decision.
yes. So we have that.
Yeah, and I think that's gonna be before the regular planning or the regular commission meeting on the 16th. They're
Right.
gonna have the hearing for that. So.
Yep.
Be interesting.
Yeah.
Nothing else for county commission?
Nothing else.
All right, now we move on to discussion items. And the first one is commercial uses, home occupations and business licenses discussion.
All right. So I am going to share my screen. If you can make it shareable, just do the multiple option. Okay. So I just put together, I know this topic came up from Erin kind of through the chair in an email recently, and I know it's been something we've talked about in the past, just in general, commercial uses, but I guess and I'll let you chime in, but Erin was bringing up the topic specifically of commercial uses in residential zones and how that all works. So I just provided in the agenda summary, a background of how we use the Article 3 use table and how that categorizes, commercial uses that are allowed in commercial zones, right? And then there's just one or two, there's that one CUP that it's allowed for, outfitter guide services in rural residential zoning, but other than that, there's rural range and grazing is the only other residential zone that would allow any type of commercial uses, but it's always going to be, I think, it's all conditional use permits for anything that's commercial in range and grazing. So for the most part, if we get an application or we find somebody's coming with a business license and they have a business, a commercial operation that they want to pursue, or they're trying to develop it, we'll look into the land use code, Article 3 use table, and find out which, what commercial category they would fall under. And then we would go to check what zone they're in. If they're in a non-residential commercial zone, then we can go and see if it's a P, then it's permitted, it's just a use by right. Then if they don't have a previous site plan submitted, they would need to submit a site plan so we can evaluate that use for the first time to make sure that it complies with the use standards, which is just like parking and ingress, egress, and height, restrictions on height of the building and building coverage, all that kind of general development standards. If the use is has a C in its little box, then it needs a conditional use permit, and then they have to go through that. That also requires them to put together a site plan. So we try to kind of consolidate the CUP application with the site plan review in those instances. But if they're doing some kind of a business that's operated out of their home, then you're not going to find that in the use table. It's going to be an accessory use, and that's going to be in section 3.3.2 under accessory uses, and then under home occupation or home business. And for home businesses, they actually would have to apply for a conditional use permit for that. If it's just a home occupation, that's much more limited. It means that they can have up to one person who does not occupy the property that's an employee. Basically in either a home business or a home occupation, those have to follow the operational performance standards in 6.12, which deals with nuisances like noise, glare, light, odors, and those kinds of things. And then, right here in the main section, it does say that all of the business activity has to be contained within the principal dwelling or within an accessory structure, a permitted accessory structure. So nothing can be happening just outdoors, like a woodworking or any kind of home business activity. It all has to happen indoors. And then there can't be any storage of equipment either. So those are the standards that we go by right now to review home occupation, home business, and then also larger commercial businesses that are operating in a zoning district that allows commercial use. So does that kind of, I want to check in right now before I move on to check in to see if that makes sense. Do you have any clarification questions on that?
My thing is, it seems like there's a disconnect between so is a home business a use by right?
Pretty much, as long as it can, in all residential zones, you can have a home occupation or a home business as long as you can meet all these requirements. Yeah.
I just found it funny. So that chart doesn't address any of that, right? So it's almost like there's another category onto the residential part,
Well,
right? That's kind of
yeah,
implied,
I see what you're
but
saying.
not spelled out.
I think the reason is a home occupation can be so many different things. It can be construction, somebody who is works off site for construction, but just comes home and parks their construction vehicle at their house. They have to have a business license for that if they're a contractor. And then, they use that as their home office. So go ahead, Opie.
Oh, and the other thing I found interesting was, and I've just printed it out, so you may not be able to find it easily, but 3.3, let's see, 3.3.2A accessory dwelling structures. And as that section, I'll let you get there, as that section starts out, I have trouble reading my screen. Accessory dwellings shall comply with the standards contained in 3.3.2B. So that separates out accessory dwellings. All other accessory uses and structures shall comply with the following standards. And it's the second one down there that I think basically says, don't try to use these accessory uses to do things you normally wouldn't be allowed to do. And it says, accessory uses and activities shall be subject to the same regulations and principles, uses unless otherwise stated. In no event shall the accessory use be construed to authorize a use not otherwise permitted in the zone district in which the principal use is located. So my reading of that is to say, so section B is its own thing about home dwellings, but don't try to sneak in uses that you wouldn't be able to use that are listed in the use table, let's say under commercial, and things like having a massage studio maybe, or a tax place might be okay in that home business unit, but probably not much else. I mean, other things like that, but probably not what we have in the use table under commercial.
Right,
That's my
Yeah.
reading.
yeah, that's a good point there
Are
to
you
bring that
okay
up.
if I ask a question or make a comment? So this is kind of interesting and I'm glad that this is being brought up because I actually had a long discussion, probably an hour and a half last week with a resident off of Kirby Lane. And she was calling about two places there. And her point was, and I think this is a really simple fix, is that when people do apply for business license and or periodically, we just have our code enforcement to do a site visit,
Mhm.
right? So you apply for a business license, you're like, this is all I'm doing. This
Right,
is what I've got going on. But there's no site visit that, or am I wrong about that? Okay, so I think that that's probably pretty imperative.
Mhm. Yeah.
I don't know, what are your thoughts?
Well,
It just seems like a very simple procedure
Yeah.
to,
I think it would be great.
squelch- Right,
Yeah, I think we could add that to our process for sure, as part of the business license application for a home
Yeah.
occupation.
right.
And one
I
of,
just started at a home occupation with the city. And, you know, the buildings inspectors, they all came out.
They did,
Oh,
Okay.
yeah, for the city, like,
Yeah.
they were like, what, where are you storing stuff?
yeah,
You know, and
Okay.
what are you doing? And then they were like pretty clear about like, hey, this is what you're allowed to do.
yeah, we do that
So-
now. We do, print out this section for the
Right.
home occupation for folks when they're getting a business license and they
Right.
say it's a home occupation, then Mikkel will go through all of those requirements and make sure that they can meet that. And then they're basically, giving their word, but we haven't
right.
done site inspections unless we think unless there's like a obvious, or we're getting complaints. That's when we would do the site inspection, like Moab Heat and Cool. That's how that came
Right,
about.
but what you're saying, Erin, you didn't get a complaint, it was just a part of your process.
Yeah.
Right,
So-
yeah.
I think it should be a part of the process.
agree with that?
I don't know, you
Oh,
thought?
yeah. Okay.
Okay, she's the whole time, she was like,
Site visit,
a bobblehead.
the city has like a pretty extensive list of everyone you have to get off, so like, even if I was, cause I'm actually applying for business right now, but like.
Yeah.
The fire marshal and the da-da-da, and it's like
Health
all these
department,
people that
yeah.
like,
We do have that
We
in our
often
business license
don't.
too.
Okay.
Grant
Yeah,
County
say,
does
like,
that also,
yeah.
but
But
there's
not for
still no
our-
site,
But
there's
when
still
it's a
no
home
site visit,
occupation, nobody goes.
nobody goes.
On the business license application, doesn't everybody sign
They have to
off on it?
sign on the
Yeah, they
business
sign off,
license
but they
application.
don't
They sign off,
We don't yeah, they could go do a site visit if they wanted
There were
to.
a couple of times when the fire department would go do that. But
Uh-huh.
also the city has quarter acre
I-
lots compared to half acre, 1 acre lots in Highland.
that's a good point, but I think it needs to be a part of the process.
Yeah.
I don't know, what do you guys, I mean, it's interesting that you just went through that process.
Activity, you're kind of waiving some of your rights of privacy, right? You're like, okay, if we're gonna give you a commercial license, then every year we can physically enter your property and look at stuff.
Mhm,
I think that's kind of a trade-off,
mhm.
but that's more of an internal, whatever
Well,
you guys do.
so it's really interesting because we are looking at our business license application process right now and bringing that so it's more on, so it's online and digital. Because in the past, it's always been a paper application and they go around to each, you know, department. And then it ends up at the clerk's office when they pay for the business license after they've gotten all their signatures. And now we're trying to get it so that it'll be entered into iWorks in the database there. So it'll be tied to the parcel and we can just go look it up in iWorks like we do any development permit.
Mhm.
And it'll be an online application form that they can fill out. And then it'll start with planning and zoning. That way, we've told people in the past, because right now it starts at the clerk's office. They go onto the clerk's webpage or they'll go to the office and get the form. And we tried it, and the clerk's been good about letting people know you really should go to planning and zoning first, because they'll tell you if it's even allowed,
Right.
you know, in that zone, or if you can make it as a home occupation. And that's a good thing for people to know right off the bat before they try to go and get all the other signatures and think that they're fine. And then they end up at us at the very end and we're like, sorry, like this isn't gonna work.
Right.
And it's a huge blow. So we want to make sure to avoid that. So we've worked with the clerk's office now to figure out that we're gonna have the application online in our portal for development applications, and it'll start with us, so we can verify that they're in the right zone and give them all the information they need to know about their land use and the zoning. And then the other thing that we're gonna do with this process is revamp the application itself, because before it never actually had a checkbox for whether or not it was a home occupation. It was just, we kind of had to guess, you know, and lately the process that Jenna and Mikkel have been doing is just on the paper form, like writing home occupation on there and having them sign as well, that and list what vehicles they're storing and whatnot. But so now we're gonna be starting this new online form. It'll have more, we'll be capturing all the information that we need. And the other part of this is that when the business license renewals would happen, they never would come to planning and zoning for a signature. So it would just auto renew, and the clerk they would just have to pay their fee, and nobody would be reviewing the renewal. So every year you have to renew your business license. So now we'll be able to check in every year and make sure that they're still in compliance.
And again, I think I would make that a site visit. So the
Right.
other rub that I would state is, so for example, this woman that called me, she assumes since they have a business license, she looked it up, they have a business license. So she assumes they're in compliance,
Right.
which they're not, right? I'll just put it that way.
Yeah.
And so, you know, she's like, well, I just assume that it's all good because the county gave them a business license. It's like, well, yeah, they're not really adhering to the land use code.
Yeah.
So I think, I personally think a site visit.
Yeah,
Is
I think it would be
is
a
it-
great thing to start, and what will happen is what we're already finding in kind of looking more closely at home businesses is that there's probably gonna be, unfortunately, some instances where we're gonna find that they're not in compliance,
Sure.
and that's gonna be some growing pains for everybody
Sure,
to deal with that. So
right.
I want to bring up that map that I printed out. I'm gonna just share it so that so that OB can see it as well. So when we did this little exercise, in GIS, Katie helped, with putting this together. You can see the majority of our business licenses are home occupations, and
I think I counted 110.
Yeah.
There's a while.
I
Yeah.
didn't really get to finish asking my question.
Yes, I'm
I got
sorry.
put that down,
I'm sorry.
but,
oh, sorry.
that's okay. I just wanted to finish this, cause, yeah, everyone jumped on it. I was asking about the inspections because I just wanna clarify where we are right now, cause we're talking about home businesses and home occupations from
Mm.
somebody who maybe is a freelancer, works from home, wants a business license, up
Mhm.
to someone who's doing an auto shop out of their house or something.
Mhm.
Like that kind of spectrum, okay.
Yep.
My question was about, so we don't require visits, we do require signatures. Which I understand.
Yep.
And I'm agreeing with the needing inspections and site visits, I'm not, especially for a Grand County potential, representative, like the code enforcement person, or
Right.
who we'd send out for
Yes,
that.
yeah, that
My-
would be it.
What I was going to ask was, is this gonna be like a blanket statement across, like, do we think, like, in this direction that we're going, where you're suggesting and like doing inspections, which I think is a really good idea, is there gonna be any sort of categorization for people that like, okay, I'm saying, like, for me, example, I'm doing like a freelance. Like
Mhm.
LLC or whatever I'm doing,
Yeah.
just for my remote work that I do.
Right,
Um. Because I'm in the city of Moab, everybody has to like come to my house. And check it off.
the site, the site
Yes.
inspection
And that's
people,
where I was trying to
right,
go with this, was like,
Mhm.
that seems to me really
like over.
just
Kill.
overkill. It
Yeah.
seems like huge overkill. Like
For the
I'm not
type of business.
having clients come to my house. I'm
Right.
not employing anybody.
You're not storing anything.
Correct,
Yeah,
right, I'm not storing anything. So like
Right.
with Aaron's business, sound like you're storing stuff. It makes sense to have the fire marshal and people come visit and like check it out, or like if you have employees or things like that.
Right,
All I was gonna do was advocate for
the really
potentially
like small scale.
breaking it up into categories, so that not everybody's required to do that, because it seems like a giant waste of time on everybody's part for what
Yeah,
the city does.
I
versus
totally see what
blanket
you're saying, yeah.
Coverage, so
Yeah.
that's what I was gonna say.
I think that would be
Yeah, right.
great to
Yeah,
have
right.
on the application itself, like, we talked about putting some general categories for type of home occupation. And
Cool.
so, yeah, we could create one category that would be for like the home office, where you're not having any employees, you don't have customers, you can check off all those boxes and be like, I'm this category, so I don't need a site
Like
visit.
maybe you get the code inspection to come out and just make sure that's what you're doing, but you don't
Right.
need to have like the fire marshal and
Right.
everybody come out to your house.
Yeah, that's overkill for sure. I agree with that.
Just a thought.
Thank you.
Okay, sorry.
No, it's okay. I'm
Totally.
glad you got to finish that
And-
thought. Sure.
And Elisa, it's a very interesting thing. We might say in Castle Valley, we don't have any businesses, and that would be a lie. I'd say probably 80 business licenses a year. And of course, there's small home occupational things. So that would look a lot like the county, except we don't have real commercial stuff in many ways. But of course, those businesses are they're commercial in another sense. So interesting.
Yeah, definitely. That's a good point. So I guess that kind of brings us up to speed on like the difference between a principal commercial activity that's categorized under Article 3 use table versus an accessory commercial activity that's just accessory to a residence in a residential zone. And kind of like what we're trying to do with our business license applications and process now. I really appreciate all the feedback on that. So we also have, so I listed out a few items for discussion. Let's see, go ahead. Yeah.
I didn't get what the difference between the home business and home occupation is.
Yeah, so a home occupation is like the general, it's what you can do, you can have that without going through a conditional use permit. And the main difference is you can have only up to one person as an employee that's not occupying the residence.
Okay,
And then, you can, yeah, I think that's the main
but
difference.
the home business, you would
Home
have to have a
business.
home in a commercial zone.
No, nope.
So,
Home business is still going to be an accessory use to your residential.
Uh-huh.
It's gonna be in a residential zone with a home. And the difference
we
is
have to
that,
conform in that space, those charts.
no, it doesn't, has nothing to do with the use table. With the commercial use, with the zoning, Article 3 use table.
Oh.
So it wouldn't have anything to do with this. It's basically the same as a home occupation, but it just means that you might have, you employ up to 3 persons rather than only one. And that's the only difference.
It still has to smell and act like a house.
Yeah,
You can't turn a
Yeah.
commercial residential area into a commercial area. So everything with the home business, you still have to look like a house.
yeah,
Primary residence, your primary use in your ADR zone is your house.
Right.
So it's gotta look like a house, act like a house, and smell like a house.
mhm. But you can have actually 3 employees
Right.
coming and going.
I guess this is kind of my gist of things. Imagine having 3 employees at like Murphy Flats, or having 3 employees up in like Thompson if you had 15 acres. You know,
Yeah, the
that's
difference between.
2 different
Yeah.
things.
Actually, we had talked about, in the future land use plan categories, I remember there was somewhere where we we made the distinction between how you would not be able to have a home occupation or a home business in a multifamily, like a higher density type development, and anything over like 5,000 square feet lot size or something like that, you could. But that is
Also,
something that we
HOAs
could,
HOAs.
Yeah,
for sure. They would know.
HOAs are
that's true,
separate.
but I know we could build.
My
it
only
into
comment with
code,
that
too.
is that stick, that traps, like, I see home occupation and stuff. I mean, it sucks being working class in Utah. The state is not favorable to being working class. A step out of that is to be entrepreneurial and to limit our lowest housing of multi-family residential is like kneecapping people on their potential, like being able to step out of that class bracket. I see this as like, as real estate goes up and gets crazy, these are avenues for people to like escape their like mass immiseration of being like on the bottom of society.
Mhm.
So like, I'm like, that's why I'm like, kind of like keyed in on this, like, hey, like, this is ways for people to like make money and be able to live here. And it's like, then also like, if you take Moab Heat and Pool, like, if we didn't have them, I called them out for a furnace fix, $300. For somebody to just show up in Grand Junction, it'd be $1,000.
Mhm.
That's like an essential service, and I get like, hey, I voted against that. But like, okay, they have more than 3 employees, but let's say they just never use that place. Like, let's say they've never had a traffic problem. Like, it's like, yeah, you don't have employees that drive there.
Right,
Now is that a, like, there's these factors that make it a problem,
yeah. for
right?
sure.
And so it's like, you know, parsing all like, I see all these parts as movements, and then I'm like, this just seems a little bit antiquated to me, or needs updated, or we need to like think differently about it. I'm like, and another thing, I just see, like, I mentioned this is general commission. Like, I'm in every building in this valley, and I see so much commercial real estate that's tied up in some Jeep storage for like an out of towner, he just bought it. And I'm like,
No, right, that is
and I'm just like, do we have local housing ordinances? Do we have like local business ordinance? Like, this commercial place has to be used commercially, like,
right.
I don't, like, I just see that's like, you know, like, okay, here's a perfect example, like the guy that pumped septic, Dan. Like, he has a resident, like, I'm pretty sure, I was looking at it, I was like, I think he's residential, but like, imagine he was the only septic pumper around, and it's like, yeah, you need to store a truck, it's like big,
Yeah.
like,
Over 2 axles.
right, and
Yeah,
it's like,
that
well, he
wouldn't
had
be
kind of a big lot, and I don't know, you know, that area is kind of funny. And I'm like, man, did he just kind of get away with that? And I'm
Right.
like, but that's an essential service,
Right.
like, you're gonna call somebody from Grand Junction? Anyways.
No, I
that's
mean,
my
those
2
are all
cents on
really
that.
good points, and I think that is exactly where we want to be. Those are the discussions we want to be having when we're talking and thinking about the future land use plan,
Right.
and like
Right.
actually taking our commercial zones and thinking about them a
Exactly.
lot differently, because you can encourage and limit different uses
Yeah.
with your zoning, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of the whole idea.
Yeah.
And if we're gonna change things up with our zoning along Highway 191 and make it more nuanced,
Right.
then we could, like, say we wanted to have more of the kind of businesses that we need, the essential services, like, let's
Yeah.
make sure that those are allowed in all the places we want. And then limit all of those uses in other zones so that they're just for like the other stuff, you know, for tourism industry.
Yeah,
Right.
I mean,
And-
that, yeah.
So those are the discussions that we're gonna be kind of
Yeah.
fleshing out more with, when we get these consultants on and kind of.
I mean, that was
dialing
definitely
in.
something that Commissioner Walker brought up again and again when we were faced with the Escape and Moab Heat and Pool back to back. It's like, we're in this process of land use planning. And we need to let that flesh out, because in the end, we're spot zoning, right?
Right.
You know, and it's just a really bad deal. And this conditional use permit, I'll just say, we have a lot of commissioners right now just saying we need to get rid of them. And that's just an honest statement, because they, you know, I think there was a lot of shock and awe, to be honest, that knowing that you could get a conditional use permit and it'll follow that property. It's not just following the business.
Yeah.
Right?
Mhm.
That was, I think, a punch in a lot of people's face, like, oh, well, we're just gonna allow that. It's
Right,
like, well,
'cause-
no, actually, we're allowing that, we're placing that overlay basically
With
on that
like
property.
Randy's place, it was like, well, if we upzoned you, it's like giving you millions of bucks, right?
For sure.
Right.
But like, could you give them the conditional use, like, be like, okay, we need this industry,
Yeah,
but now that conditional use permit follows you.
yeah.
So that's still kind of like giving you like,
100%.
so is it like, do you
Yeah,
need
they
to
can turn around
modify
and
the
sell it.
conditional use permit?
A lot of communities are getting rid of them.
I think.
Yeah,
I
a
think-
lot of them are, and I
yeah.
think we need to
That
really
lasted 10
think
years.
about, we have so many
Yeah.
areas where we require CUP and it definitely could be minimized. I mean,
Yeah.
like, for instance, we have a CUP application for a non-motorized outfitter guide that's in highway commercial on the highway. It's required a CUP, which it should just be permitted. So for this
That's
person,
super
they're
rare.
trying to get their business license and we had to tell them, sorry, you have to go through a CUP. And
Right.
it's just, it's silly, like, it's a whole thing that doesn't, so in some, like in rural residential, we should probably just take that out.
Yeah,
And then in highway commercial, just make it permitted,
yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
and just.
Right.
And what I was discussed, gosh, years ago, when we first started, some of the rewrites to land use code was to, in fact, I was surprised to see that the conditional use was still allowed in our, I thought it was. gonna be.
Right, it is,
Right.
it's
And
interesting.
I asked my Chrissy, but
Yeah,
look up ordinance, I think that was removed, I really do. think you're- I
yeah.
don't remember
Huh.
if it ever went through the whole process.
Yeah, maybe it never
And
got updated.
especially
in
when the
code.
state legislature is manipulating them to the point that we then basically have no power,
Mhm.
right? This body,
Mhm.
the legislative body has no power over them.
Mhm. Yeah.
I think they got tired of fighting with the counties.
Aaron, to your
No, it's a
point,
really good point, Aaron.
yeah, to your point, Aaron, if you own a commercial property, you're not required to have a business license,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
Yeah,
Are you?
well, if you have, as long as you have a business, yeah, not
How
if
about
you,
if you don't?
no,
have
if you don't have a
business?
business, you don't have.
How about if you have a storage building with a couple of Jeeps and you own it?
No, as long as if you're operating a business, which, you know,
Right.
there's some gray area in how we define businesses, we've been finding, so. But, you know, I think it's based on if there's like money transaction, you know, happening.
A
taking
lot of
place.
times, the only reason people get a business license is for tax purposes.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's the main reason.
There-
for-
there are places that have restricted use. The one I know of is airplane hangars. And if the airport has federal funding, in general, the feds require that the hangars actually have aircraft or be used for aircraft services.
Mhm.
But other than that, I don't know, there may be others.
I mean, sadly, I do think you're right, and you know this, that I think people are, you know, dissolving their commercial property. I know somebody recently that was an excavation company, he was in San Juan County, sold it off because of course it had more, you know, value, they're turning it into condos, and now he's like complaining about Grand County, he can't find a place to put his equipment, it's like, well, you should have not sold your property. Right, but it's hard because the value is so high that I think people are like, well, yeah, I'm gonna sell out. Why wouldn't I?
Well, you know, we have a housing problem, so I understand.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Well, we also gotta be real careful about doing quasi rezones, allowing businesses in residential zone districts.
Yeah,
That's quasi rezoning. Like
It is,
It is.
county, we
right.
have to be really careful with that,
Yeah.
because that's.
yeah.
We
That's a
don't want a lot of
slippery
commercial
slope.
uses out there doing things next to your neighbor, especially where the county's getting, when we used to have 10, 5, 2-acre parcels out there everywhere, it was
Yeah.
one thing, but now they're 4-acre lots out there,
Yeah.
Yeah,
annexed to the city.
yeah, that's what they are.
Well, and now we also, with the future land use plan, where we have the opportunity to actually look at areas where we could put compatible commercial uses
Right.
that are off the highway, like the
Right.
Spanish Trail kind of
We
corridor,
used to have
Apple Creek.
No,
Yeah,
they were specific, like,
Yeah.
and it was mainly on the corners, and
Yeah.
anywhere in the large areas,
Mhm.
neighborhoods.
Yeah.
But it was also restricted to, neighborhood commercial type.
Right, neighborhood, commercial, neighborhood.
Yeah.
Compatible type of,
Yeah.
Places you have to go, you don't wanna drive all the way into town.
right,
Right.
exactly.
Place by ground and all.
Yeah.
And that was a big discussion at one of our general plans, when we were doing safe residential, safe rural residential, like 2 master plans ago. We still put notes in for commercial,
Yeah.
specifically so that we would have areas out there that people could do the neighborhood commercial. type stuff,
Mhm.
but you would still do that.
For sure. Yeah, so we'll be building on that concept and I think it'll be very beneficial. Yeah.
Something that Elisa and I were talking about earlier today was the sort of chicken and the egg scenario of the form that a certain use can take in the zone that it exists within. So a good example was we were talking about banks. And, you know, from the perspective of Moab, most of the banks that exist here are large. They're mostly off the highway, they have drive-ins, but coming from a pretty dense urban area, for me, a bank is a small storefront. It's something that exists with a bunch of other storefronts, definitely residential compatible. And so we were talking about the relationship between use and also building restrictions within certain zones.
Mhm.
And that there is potentially some room to sort of finesse these things with, you know, sort of allowing uses maybe in multiple zones, but having different building requirements for each of those zones.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's actually gonna be very relevant for the consultants' work where they're gonna help us kind of visualize what the building form could look like in these areas where the nodes are, where we're gonna hopefully potentially allow more commercial activity in residential, traditionally residential areas, and have those opportunities for compatible uses, but the building form will resemble what's going on in the neighborhood, so it won't feel like a major commercial area, you know, but you'll have those services there. So, yeah, thank you. That's a good point. Before we get too far in the topic of future land use plan stuff, I wanted to just bring this up. This is a weird thing, and Mary, I don't know if you've had history with this, but I don't see in the code anywhere where it talks about for home occupation or home businesses, if a business can have customers or not. And that seems a little problematic. Like, shouldn't we be knowing, shouldn't they have to indicate on their home occupation or home business license to say, I have no customers visit, or I do have customers?
I used to ask, but, also depends on the business. I mean, it's
Yeah, for sure. But I
naturally,
mean,
you're gonna understand, got a grocery store, you're gonna have customers. And daycares were a big deal. Because daycares,
right,
if you have less than 8, they're allowed, it's just allowed home occupation. But
right.
they still have people coming and going all the time.
Yeah, for sure.
When they have more than 12, then it becomes conditional use. And that's when they have to start talking about traffic.
For
But
daycare,
most-
yeah.
I thought somewhere in there, especially I think site planning, when you start, when any kind of commercial thing that happens in the residential area, you have your site plan.
And Elisa, in Castle Valley, we do ask that question about, basically, we try to make sure that there isn't traffic going in and out to the person's house in terms of customers, or deliveries. You know, so it is about traffic and kind of disturbance. If you ran some business, selling something, and let's say it generated 30 vehicles coming into the community, going up and driving up to that place, we'd probably not allow it. And what we do, it's different. Of course, you've got different streets than we have, but it is we do actually check very carefully on how many customers, and then all of ours are conditional use permits for businesses.
Okay, yeah, that's good to know. I think that will be something we'd want to add to our application, whether or not there's customers
So even, I mean, depending
for a
on
home occupation.
We also know that beauty shops have customers.
Right,
If
exactly.
that one comes in and goes out.
Right, and so I guess I would,
You always had to have extraordinary parking.
mhm,
Was there any?
offsite parking,
You
yeah,
can't park on the street.
right.
And we, Mary, we certainly don't do, you can't have one customer or two or three or four. It's just it's one of the things we check on the conditional use permit. And there are some limits on some businesses, but I don't remember them in detail.
To add to those 2 points, I think another chicken and the egg scenario to think about would be in some of these areas where we're hoping to encourage walkability and encourage sort of densification. If we're hoping that people will walk to businesses, then that's a really different impact than every single customer driving there. And, you know, potentially you could have more customers if a larger percentage of them are walking and you don't have to put in as much parking.
Mhm.
So also something to think about in
Yeah.
terms of,
Right.
and I think that also gets
Requirements.
to building requirements.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
That's how the North Corridor was first set up.
Say that
The
again?
North Corridor.
Oh, yeah.
That's where the sidewalks were not there until the city annexed in, but the city and the county adopted the same. Or zoning, and I can't remember what it is now. But when the city annexed into this, annexed into the North Corridor, they
Mhm.
just adopted that zoning. But it was all about walkability, it's all about making sure that you can walk to storefronts.
Right, right.
I think they've been talking about that for a long time. But
Yeah.
that, you know, the North Corridor was a little easier because it's brand new construction.
Mhm.
South Florida, you have the 300-foot right of way that belongs to you guys.
Right.
So the only way you're gonna get that is
The
the
frontage.
frontage.
Yes, yeah. So that's a huge opportunity I see for creating more walkable, like commercial areas is that stretch on the frontage roads. Try to bring up that map, actually.
And there's some areas right close to the block, you know, just real close to the city. The grades of the property is so low that there's no way they can make it a walkable. We're gonna have to drive down into it or bring it clear up.
Right.
There's a couple of areas out there that they look at. And water, there's some places that don't have water and sewer.
That's right. Yeah, so kind of getting back to the future land use planning opportunities, I just listed out like 3 sort of changes that we've identified so far, or reasons why we kind of the driving principles. So in the changes that we want to see in commercial zoning districts would be to create more opportunities for small businesses, contribute to diverse economic activity, and provide retail, professional, or personal services in Spanish Valley for ease of access for those residents. And so that's just kind of like overarching kind of principles, but I'm sure there's more reasons to look at the zoning, changing up the zoning for commercial uses in our southern corridor. And then we do have our emerging nodes which are still, I'm sure, Mary, these were the nodes were back when you were, you know, we were talking about the old current future land use plan, which was Mill Creek Drive and Spanish Trail. And thinking about Spanish Trail all the way from the highway down to San Crowley Drive and maybe even further. The property that's on the cemetery side of Spanish Valley Drive, right at that intersection there, is all city owned, right? And there's like one triangle parcel that is where the city's proposing to put a huge water storage tank. And we wouldn't be able to do anything with it if they, apparently, that's what I've heard so far, is that it would just be a vacant, like a lot with this water storage tank on it. Whereas if they could find another location, which I would love to have that conversation with them more about locating that somewhere else, because that intersection could be a huge,
Well,
like,
right.
really cool little like node.
And they've not done any engineering on that yet, and
Right.
there's actually quite a bit of angst about that tank going in there. The water
Mhm.
table's not very
That's what I've
deep.
heard
It's
that
like
as
11
well.
feet deep. And
Yep.
there's some issues with just the geology of the area and residents kind of, I guess, below that, like falling into Pack Creek, are really, really, really concerned about
Right.
that project. There's
Yeah.
a lot of angst surrounding that.
We've been discussing it for years.
Right. But I know that it's on the CIB list and, you know, my understanding is they think it'll get funded. But they have these other sites proposed that don't have those issues, so.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely something we should pursue more conversation with the city on.
That'd be great. Yeah, it's a good spot.
Okay, so I was able to bring up this is UDOT's final recommended option for the frontage road design. You guys can't see it. Shoot.
I disconnected.
I'll send it to you. I'll send this link to you. It's online. It's there. They have it out. It's like a ArcGIS story map. But it basically extends from, what's that, right down by the arena, a little north of the arena, like where the Wingate subdivision is. So that's where it would start and from the south, and then it goes all the way up past Mill Creek Drive, just a little further past Mill Creek Drive, about maybe what, quarter mile or so. Yeah,
Is it on both sides of the road?
both sides. Yep. So, and with that design, they've put in a shared use pathway on both sides as well. So it could be good opportunity for changing up some of the zoning ideas and commercial, the built form along that corridor.
But it'll expand commercial use a lot if they get that road.
Yeah, for sure, because one of the big cost prohibitive factors for businesses along the highway right now is that they have to put in the big turning lane for, you know, to get their highway access permit from UDOT, and that's usually the reason why they just drop out, because they can't afford it. The big hotels can afford it, but not the small businesses. Anyway, okay, so the other, so you guys see that map. We've been working on that land use inventory. I have another big version of the land use inventory that shows, residential uses, residential densities, like what's on the ground today. And then this one is it's obviously just focused on the commercial uses. And originally I was using the tax assessor data to come up with this, but we figured out we could just put in business licenses. And so that's probably more of an accurate depiction of what's on the ground for commercial types. So it's still kind of a work in progress. I think we still need to kind of ground truth some of those things, but it kind of gives us an idea of what's going on, where certain businesses are kind of trending in different locations, so we can use that to determine, you know, future land use stuff. And then as far as like immediate code changes, we do plan on implementing some land use code amendments to Article 3, the use table, even before the future land use plan is adopted. There's just some really urgent things that need to happen that are really obvious. So like one of those things is in neighborhood commercial currently, you have to have a residence can only be on the upper story of a retail or commercial building, which is pretty limiting for a lot of areas. That it would make more sense to just allow, if there's enough room on the lot, you could just allow a residence next door or just on the ground level of a commercial building. So we want to change that. And then also, currently you can have, I guess it's permitted to have a theater in neighborhood commercial, which if we were going to designate neighborhood commercial or neighborhood mixed use in Spanish Valley, like on Spanish Trail Road, we probably wouldn't want a movie theater necessarily, because that's a larger kind of commercial use, large scale commercial use, but maybe there would be some distinction between a movie theater and a small playhouse kind of use that could be appropriate. That's just one example. Also, the other example, well, the instance I brought up just recently with the need for a CUP for non-ATV outfitter in highway commercial, that should probably be removed. And then we're considering removing the CUP requirement or removing the CUP opportunity for that in rural residential. So kind of, and then overall, I think looking at, like we've been saying, looking at the CUPs and why they are there and do we really need them?
The only time I felt like a conditional use was advantageous is when they did, like, road departments need for, asphalt plants.
So like,
Yeah, 'cause they
Oh.
put them in and they're usually out in Green River. I mean, that's the only time I ever felt like they were necessary.
yeah,
Because they're out in Green River, they use them, they go away, and it's gone. So the next person that comes and gets it still needs to file the CUP. Because once it's gone for
Right.
the time that it doesn't
Yeah.
make it usable anymore.
Some kind of a temporary use.
It's a temporary,
Mhm.
yeah, they should just do it, set up this,
Yeah.
exactly that, a temporary use rather than a conditional use, except you can still put conditions on. it.
Yeah,
That's specific to a conditional use, is you have to put specific uses to that condition of use.
or yeah,
And then they have to.
the
follow those, and
mitigation
then,
measures.
That's how the asphalt plants work.
Mhm.
And then everybody, once again, had to go there, make sure they did everything right, so.
Right,
There are good reasons.
there
for
are really,
that. I
yeah.
think the state has been trying to pull them out for quite some time,
Mhm.
and I think it's a good idea.
Right,
I can't imagine
It,
special uses.
Right. it might be helpful. We had that conditional use permit training with the
oh, yeah.
Salt Lake
Mhm.
attorney, and it might be good for the planning commission to have a similar training to really
Mhm.
understand. I mean, basically, in the end, we were told, we can do nothing.
Yeah, I mean, as
Can't do
long as
much.
it can meet all of the requirements and then
Yeah.
you can mitigate all the impacts
Yeah.
reasonably, you have to approve it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a moot point after, if
Sure.
you have a CUP and it's not, there's not a really good reason for the CUP, then you just shouldn't have.
And it's the ombudsman that Trish is talking about, and they do class, they do come down and talk to you. They can do just planning commission, they can do.
That might be good.
I love the ombudsman. I used to.
Okay,
I've
good.
got files in my.
Yeah, that might be good. Just,
Because I argue with people all the time.
Yeah, I think it'd be good to check in with
They're,
somebody
they're,
like that
they're really
to.
good to bring out, just bring information.
So let's see, any other code changes? I don't know, I just thought I would bring up these ideas. One of the ones that we've heard from Orion is that there's oftentimes people are trying to do something along the lines of a commercial kitchen, but we don't have that as a use anywhere in our code. So maybe
That's
something
one
to,
of my-
something to think about, because it's a good business
One
idea.
of the number one things people
Yeah.
like Eclectica, when they
Mhm.
closed down, they were
Yeah.
using, so many people were using
Yeah.
that as catering, and what a great business. You can
Yeah.
you make your stuff and then you go deliver it. And then when the raft company bought that, they were like, oh my God, can you do this in my, and the city guys are like, oh man, I don't know, this is like pushing the rules, and it's like, well, here's something that doesn't really, is a good moneymaker for people, but doesn't have a lot of impact. The idea of like that desk in the corner is kind of like how Barry always explained to me home occupation, and it's like, yeah, okay, like kitchen counter desk, or, that kind of thing.
Depends
So-
on, yeah, how big of a operation you want.
That's a really good point. And we talk about like wanting to try to simplify our economy. And then, little people can't really get a start because they are required to have access to a commercial kitchen for their business.
Mhm,
But then they can't have a commercial kitchen in their home or somewhere else because of
right. But there's no
zoning and all this
really,
stuff. So,
yeah,
yeah, I know many people in town that run small
totally.
food businesses, same, and like have struggled with that. They're like, what do? We have nowhere to go. Like YGP has the only,
Right.
space, and they rent it on an hourly basis, and it's this whole
Mhm.
thing, and it's not always available, and so.
Right.
Yeah, I just support what that,
Yeah.
Aaron just said, basically.
And
Yeah.
Space Sanitarium is actually the one that's more involved in that than anybody.
Yeah,
Oh,
for sure. But there's no reason why we shouldn't allow something like that in our basic commercial zones, like currently, we just don't have a category for a commercial kitchen. No, it's really strange. I don't know if it's just like something we could,
Where,
well, I think
where
we
does
should just add it.
catering fall?
Well, so a lot of catering businesses are home occupations, but they have to use a commercial kitchen to cook
Right.
to prepare all their food. And so the lack of any licensed commercial kitchen is creating problems for those home businesses that would otherwise be able to,
So it'd be a business that's just the commercial kitchen.
yeah, it would just
Not
be.
used for a restaurant.
Well, I mean, it depends, I guess, but I think the idea would be just to allow a commercial kitchen facility in general. And if somebody wanted to create that business and rent it out to all the different, caterers and people who.
In the county, every business that has.
Like a restaurant, yeah, but this would be just a commercial kitchen that would be used for all the individual businesses around town that don't have the ability to prepare the food on site for their businesses.
What if
Yeah.
like somebody wanted to, somebody had a home where they have an extra room and they're like, I could turn this into a commercial kitchen and me and my 3 friends who are all bakers and make bread for the coffee shops.
Mhm.
Could come to my house and like we can bake and stuff and then go bring that home.
I would think.
Is there any
it would-
reason they couldn't do that in
Yeah,
a business?
Well, that would be a health department thing.
Okay, that's not anything to do with us.
Because
Yeah,
we did allow that out in, Buena Vista. Remember she had a bakery,
mhm.
she had a bakery in her home, and then she turned it into a pizza shop, and then she left. Because she would do her bakery, she had a little bakery in her house, but she took it into an accessory room, or accessory
Mhm.
structure.
Right.
It was built by the building, it was built by the building department, the building department inspector.
They permitted it as
Yeah,
an
and it's
accessory
specific
structure.
For that, and the sanitarian guy came out and made sure that was good. But it was just for her to bake her breads, and then she took those, and there's a guy across the street from my daughter in the city that had, his house is a bakery, huge. But they didn't want so. I don't know why. I loved her bakery.
Cause it's hard work, it's really hard work at 3 AM in the morning.
Yeah, all day, every day. Well, she actually moved, she did, I don't think there's
Yeah.
there's nobody here that wanted it, I think, they
Mm.
lost that. And even the guy that works across the street from my daughter in the city. He used to deliver to all the bakery, all the.
Restaurants and stuff.
And.
Hmm. That is a bummer.
I don't know what sometimes it's because things just don't work for our county,
Right.
but it's.
The timing of things. So I think that's something we should check and make sure what the regulations are for the health department and that, if it would be totally out of the question.
For the health department, totally, it's been on the dog and all.
Yeah, they have to permit
You have
it
to have
for
your
sure.
license to be able to do it.
So I guess that kind of wraps up my, that topic. I don't know if you guys have any other suggestions right now, or if you think of things that that should be talked about for immediate code changes, just shoot me an email or we can talk about those at the next meeting as well.
Yeah.
So
I've noticed when I go through the address, the numbers don't go to the right spots.
that is true. That's a problem right
I
now.
just, as I told Chris, give me back my plans, I can't find the stuff.
Yeah, things have gotten a little out of
I
order
don't
for
know,
sure.
I told him somehow.
Okay, so if, we actually have to be out of here by what, 6 o'clock for the next thing.
We only have,
So we have 20 minutes. If we want to move on to I don't have a lot to
If
talk about
nobody-
for the next item, but
if nobody has anything else, then let's move on to the next item, which is preliminary revisions to the outdoor lighting requirements.
yes. So I started the draft here in your packet. You'll see the draft amendments. I also put in the packet, the Moab's, City of Moab's ordinance where they did their amendments, and I've been going through and kind of pulling out changes that they made that would make sense for the county. And so far, I have just gotten to the very beginning of this. Let's see, so the first section was our so that like the purpose, I made those changes from the last meeting. So those are kind of more refined. And then in the next section that I made changes, it was basically just, let's see. Oh, talking about the requirements for the fully shielded fixtures. And essentially what the city did is they added this, I think it's pretty good, and I think it would be something we'd want to do as well, but I'll just read it, this requirement here that says, all light fixtures shall be aimed and shielded so that the direct illumination shall be confined within the boundaries of the property from which it originates. Lighting shall not be aimed onto adjacent properties except in cases of shared parking, shared pedestrian pathways, or for coordinated development, site planning multiple parcels. Sites spanning multiple parcels. And that basically kind of replaces or consolidates the other two requirements that we had in here previously. And it kind of just gets more direct to the point. The previous, our code right now, it says, kind of goes on this whole thing about fixtures with translucent or transparent sides, or sides with perforations or slits do not qualify as fully shielded. I think that it's getting a little too prescriptive, where in our code right now, that language is way too prescriptive. And the replacement language that the city came up with is a lot more kind of direct and kind of covers the bases. So those are the kinds of things I'm working to change in the code right now. And I'll share this draft with you guys so you can, I'll just share it as a Google Doc so you can provide comments too if you have in your spare time to go through and read it. And we were also going to share out the landscaping ordinance when it got to a better point as well. So we will do that as well. We were just kind of trying to finalize some of the open-ended questions. But yeah, I don't know if anybody has any comments on this so far. It's kind of a work in progress.
I think simplification is good.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that section is really long. I mean, it goes for several pages.
So is there a section here? I know there is, I just can't remember where it is. So just- let me read through it. Where everyone's going to have to come into compliance.
Yes, oh, good. Thank you for bringing that up. Yeah, the amortization period. So when I brought this up with I put it on the commission's agenda, I think it was the last meeting or the one before, to check in with the commission, what they thought about just in general, if there were any, major points that we should be covering in this revision. And specifically, I asked if they thought that we should do what the city did, which was extend the amortization period out another 5 years. And the consensus, I think, from most of the commissioners was that that we should probably look at an extension, but maybe not as far as 5 years, maybe just 2 to 3 years. So that was kind of a interesting, I don't know.
We have a lot of.
In one sense, like one commissioner brought up that might be tricky because then we would be inconsistent with the city, and like for the general public, it might get confusing, if we have a different time period than the city. But I don't know, I think it's definitely something to be thinking about with all that, because one of the things that we really need to be doing during that phase, which we had 5 years from 2019 to do, but it didn't really get done, which was provide the public with resources to replace those fixtures. And there's a lot of like funding opportunities and ways that we can help and be, providing assistance so that it's not so, I don't know. I think one of the fears is that we don't want to necessarily be imposing something that's going to be a cost for existing.
Lessens the impact.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So I think where we ended it with the commission discussion was that it would be really good this time around to get together a little subcommittee that can really be pursuing the like educating the public and getting the resources out there to change up the fixtures over the course of whatever time period that's going to be, but making sure that there's an actual committee that's dedicated, not just planning staff, because
Yeah.
otherwise it'll just get pushed to the side. There was a Dark Skies working group for a while, and it was the city and the county working together. But it fizzled, like right around when I came on as staff, I remember going to a couple of those meetings and then it kind of just went away, and I don't know really why, but
Was the city was the initiator, of it. I can't remember who was the person.
I remembered like, what was the city council member's name? Kaylin was there, I know Kevin from the commission side was there.
Caitlin started. What Caitlin did, when she came to the board, so she was just doing.
Oh, Caitlin, yeah, she might have been
How
involved
the
in that.
counties, I mean, the streetlights from Rocky Mountain, are those lights coming to compliance, all of them yet?
I think we're supposed to be doing that, like, I think the county, that was a discussion at the working group, I remember it was. What's our timeline for the county to come into compliance with its own requirements,
Well, like
for
the streetlights. yeah.
streetlights?
And the one that I remember that they told us all to go look at was the one there on
The city
191.
the city's done theirs, yeah, right.
191, not all of them, one from my house, isn't it?
Mm,
yes, it's
One
in my
ninety-one and.
Yeah, they've done some, just the,
Fifth West,
uh-huh,
that's the light they're using. as
right,
their-
as their test or whatever, yeah,
And
I
it
remember
works.
seeing that.
Well, one of them from my house, I don't care, it's yellow, but it's not that down.
Right,
Doesn't bother me. so I like that.
On the north end is what you're saying. Yeah, okay, fine, yeah, okay.
yeah, so something we'll continue this discussion for sure and keep working on it.
Okay,
Um,
any more on outdoor lighting? All right, normally we'd have citizens to be heard at 6 o'clock. Do we have anybody on? Okay. Then let's move into future considerations. It looks like items to be heard at the next meeting is Tejada ADO amended master plan, EAN extension.
Yep. Yeah, so they are looking to extend their site plan approval, expiration date. That would be for 6 months, and I believe it's because they're still working with UDOT on their access. Or is it something else?
They're amending their site plan.
They are doing that as well. Okay, so that might be the reason. I can't remember. Yeah, so I think, oh, that's right.
Yeah.
They're actually gonna be able to not have to use the highway for their main access. So by doing this amended master plan, they're gonna change the access to the other side street or whatever.
Right.
So
To
that'll be,
avoid having to deal with you.
mhm, and then they can go forward.
Mhm.
Yeah, so that'll be a public hearing, just because it is an amended master plan and the development agreement. And then other discussion items, I've just listed here. Let's see, we've had this discussion in the past, and I think it's gonna come up more and more, is in our section for land use code, on accessory employee housing. It's a little tricky for us to interpret because right now it says that you can have 5 RV sites per commercial use. And there are some properties where you have multiple commercial uses. And so then it begs the question of, could you have 5 RV sites per commercial use on the same property? Like if you had 3 different businesses or commercial uses, could you have 15 RV sites? And so we need to clarify that, and that would be that would be one of those immediate code updates. And then we had talked a long time ago too, as in the planning commission, about maybe even reworking that whole section to make the number of RV sites relative to the parcel size. So if you were, if you had like a smaller lot, it would be
Proportionate according to.
Mhm,
your lot.
But it's
proportionate to
also
the lot size.
specific to employee housing, right? So it'd be how many people you employ, not necessarily how big your business is.
Well, that's interesting.
Yeah, that could be a
Yeah.
consideration
Anybody
for
ever
sure.
Used it?
Yeah, we've
Yeah.
had people use it. Yeah,
Yeah, I just noticed that, Hidden Cuisine, she just put in all her, RVs. Yeah. Did you do that? Yeah.
mhm. Yeah, so I believe she went through our process. Do you recall? Yeah. Okay.
If not,
As if
by
I
the way,
remember
she
the
has five
newspaper,
years.
so.
By the way, she just put it by me, and it was already complete. It's a little rough, I'll put it that way.
Yeah, so, I mean, more and more we are getting people to use that accessory employee housing option. So, but there are a few properties that we know of that could be using that and saying like, we could have like more than 5 because they have different commercial uses on the same property. So, so something to think about. I don't know if we want to have that as a discussion item at the next meeting, but, we could try. The other thing is obviously, giving you the latest review of the outdoor lighting revisions and then, the discussion item that Erin has brought up too in the past was looking at the ADO program and possibly extending it and revising it so that we could have more of those going in possibly. So what do y'all think? Do you wanna try to shoot for discussing all 3 of these or kind of narrow it down or?
I think if the time, yeah, what do you think the time would permit?
I think it would
takes
be
some time to work through
doable
this.
I mean, as long, the public hearing for the Tejada ADO is not gonna take long. Shouldn't be, it's not controversial or anything.
As far as preparation time from the planning team.
I think this is probably, I think the only thing that may be difficult to get to is looking at evaluating the ADO program and trying to figure out,
We do 2 next time and.
yeah,
then
maybe
delay
save that one for the next meeting, the very next meeting. It's a good
Okay.
idea. In the meantime, the landscaping ordinance was gonna go on to the planning or the county commission's agenda as a workshop for this next April 16th meeting. But they've had too much on the agenda, too many things that were happening before the commission meeting, so it's getting pushed to the May commission meeting. So we're just we'll send that out. We didn't send the draft version of it yet, but we will. We were just trying to clear up some of the language before.
Obi's
Yeah.
got his hand up.
Okay, and, but still, we'll send
You
out
gotta
the
unmute, Obi.
landscaping ordinance and the dark skies ordinance for you guys to comment on. Go ahead, Obi.
I just had a question, and the question was, on the ADOs, I thought we were close to, at one point, the limit of how many we could approve. Have some of those places given up on it, so there's actually some margin of things we could actually approve in terms of units?
Yeah, I don't know the exact number. I know that the number that were originally approved was not the full 150. I think it was like around 124 or 130. So there might have been like 20 to 25 that were still, that we didn't make it up to the maximum units that were allowed. So there was that. And then I know that one application for sure withdrew. And I don't recall how many units they had, so we'd have to look at that, but I can definitely provide that information when we do report on the ADO program.
And then I'm gonna guess that what's happened is nobody else, the applications have been open, but nobody else has been applying for the open units. Is that correct?
Well, we don't have it, it's the sunset date for the application the application process was the end of 2023,
Got it.
right? Yeah, so that's
Got it.
why, so the program is basically not open anymore for
Yeah.
applications. So the discussion would be, should we open it back up? Possibly and allow for the remaining units that were not processed or approved to go through.
Got it.
Mhm.
And Elisa, earlier tonight, we talked about an update on the future land use planning too. Was that intended for next meeting or beyond that? So I think you mentioned that you were gonna try to go to county council in their next meeting. Then you'd do an update for us afterwards
For,
for approval of the consultant,
for the contract?
right?
Yes, so that will go, the contract just has to be approved by the commission for the amount
right?
that we have budgeted already. And then I would think that, yeah, by the next planning commission meeting, we should have a check-in with and a kind of an update on the consultants and who they are and what kind of the schedule, the work schedule is.
Yeah, it may take a while to get a more detailed schedule, maybe a few weeks, but I think once we get the detailed schedule from them, then it'd be a good time to give an update to this group.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, so maybe not the next meeting, but
Maybe
the
the one after.
one after. Yeah. That makes sense.
Okay,
If it's in the budget, why do you have to take it to council?
It's because, I don't know, they still want because it's over 50,000, I think you still, you have to
Oh,
get
yeah,
the
there is,
contract
yeah.
approved by the commission chair, so. Yeah,
Well, the budget was for it.
I tried to put it on the pre-approval list, but.
we have about 3 minutes left before we have to vacate our room, so good
I
timing.
like this, deal. We need to do this with the county commission. We need to move in here.
Yeah, nice.
So it looks like if there's nothing else, we could entertain a motion to adjourn.
I'm very good, we should.
Mary,
I'll second.
okay, okay, all in favor? All right, meeting's adjourned.